No!
Orphan was directed by the same director who also did Non-Stop, a movie I find very entertaining, the 2005 House of Wax, The Commuter in 2018, and The Shallows from 2016 with Blake Lively, one of the better shark films I remember seeing in recent years. There are a lot of key collaborators on screen for him, Liam Neeson and Vera Farmiga being the more obvious ones, but also some behind-the-scene personnel. Orphan was written by David Leslie Johnson, who had a writing credit in The Conjuring 2, one of my favorite horror scripts of the 2010s, Aquaman, and the third Conjuring movie. Orphan was also edited by Timothy Alverson, who edited the last two Insidious movies, so there are a lot of James Wan connections behind the scene as well. Orphan was released back in 2009, and I remember seeing the poster when I was a kid. Every time I see that sinister look, I always felt a bit scared, especially how they translated the title to Chinese. Everything sounds so much more terrifying. I remember seeing clips of it with friends, and since then it just kind of disappeared into the abyss of my memory. Naturally, this is the perfect chance to officially watch this thing from top to bottom as an adult, a student of film, and a fan of horror. While there are things that work pretty well, I don't think everything the filmmakers throw at the wall sticks. For starters, the obvious point is that Isabelle Fuhrman playing Esther is terrific in the film, wonderfully cast, this little girl with huge rounded eyes with such an innocent voice, yet the costume designs and how the filmmakers present this character make her so unsettling. There's something really off about her character. She's an orphan in pretty dresses and paints naive paintings, but also carries herself like an adult. She uses foul language, she's extremely smart, she has a traumatic past and carries a Bible with her all the time, and she seems to know a great deal about life and adulthood. This is a menacing performance. You're always trying to solve the puzzle about her. I would even say it's probably one of the highlights of child presence in a horror film of the 21st century so far. Matter of fact, everyone in this film is pretty good. The little girl playing the daughter with hearing disability, Max, is also incredible. The editing is at times quite fierce. This quick editing style is fairly fast paced, sometimes breaking continuity, I think. There are scenes where the shots only flash on the screen for a second or two, and there are scenes where all the shots linger on screen for the exact same amount of time, creating this rhythm it didn't seem to have before. There is a lot of direct and almost flat lighting with the cinematography. Instead of lighting characters from a 3/4, many of the setup feels like the light is almost in front of the subjects, so you see their faces in clear daylight, but also you get shots like these where they're lighting the talents from overhead, creating a lot of shadows, kind of like what the poster looks like, making everything a lot more intense. The film started off pretty promising. I would say the first act I think is really effective. A cold prologue, the setup of Vera Farmiga's character Kate and her ghost, some maybe conflict burning up between the couple, and a beautiful setup of the relationship between the daughter, Max, and her. There's this scene in Max's bedroom where she takes off her hearing aid, and all of a sudden the film turns into silence as the mother and daughter communicate in sign language. It pulls the audience closer to the bond and the moment. I thought that was a really good idea. But to the issue I have with this movie at its core is the writing. The father, played by Peter Sarsgaard, well cast by the way. This character kind of doesn't have anything to offer other than being the presence Vera Farmiga's character bounces off from. It is a scenario where the protagonist believes in something and everyone else just thinks she's insane, so we get a lot of conversation between the two wherein one is trying to convince and the other is trying to deny. It gets a little repetitive. At the end, he just feels like a very undercooked character. The kids from school made the environment especially difficult for me to believe. There's this bully kind girl in school who always picks on Esther. This is the type of character you would see in a cheap high school romance, but is somehow here embodied by a 9-year-old. I'm pretty sure kids that young don't have the ability to purposely bump into someone so they drop all their shit so they can ridicule them in public. However, those can easily be passed, but when it comes to the horror element of the story, it's where I have the biggest issue with, and I want to talk about perspective and why I thought it is off in Orphan. Let's take Get Out as an example. The horror from Get Out is spawning from the protagonist Chris, his fear of being isolated in an environment, being discriminated, objectified. Picking movies that we've covered so far, the horror from The Lure is coming from stepping into adolescence and adulthood. Goodnight Mommy is from miscommunication. Slither is from distance with your lover. Why I said that the perspective in Orphan is off is because it's not from the mother's perspective. Rather, it is just as equally as it is from Esther. I would probably even argue how it is more from Esther than it is from Kate. How is it off though? Well, the film depicts Esther as the villain. There is no mystery and questions because it's made clear that Esther is the one doing these horrible things. So while Kate is stressing trying to convince everyone the fact, the audience is being put ahead of every character in the story, where we see that and Esther's activities. By painting Esther as the end-all be-all villain, the perspective becomes very two-sided. The horror of Orphan isn't spawning off from Kate's perspective anymore. Rather, it is spawning more from the audience anticipating when the next fucked up thing is going to happen instead of it being from within characters. And in this case, it's the parents' paranoia and the children's jealousy and their inability to trust. Therefore, the horror and terror doesn't work in Orphan. It's more about what is Esther's going to do next and how is Kate going to react. And so as a whole, we get moments like this where I guess it's supposed to be scary. And there are a lot more moments like these throughout the film, and they're not even funny by this point. And I guess it's very hard to convey this idea across, so I guess to simplify everything, Orphan is presented more like a cat and mouse chase movie where Kate is trying to catch Esther, whereas it makes more sense and it would be more haunting if the film is more one-sided in a tunnel vision and in a first-person perspective, where the mysteries are hidden until the very end and the line between reality and imagination is blurred even to the slightest. All in all, I think Orphan has a very good first act, a very solid cast and performances, and an exciting ending. Very ballsy. It would have been more interesting if they chose the more ambiguous route, but I can't really discuss it without spoiling it. Even if, let's say, the filmmakers were trying to hint at an ambiguous story because there are moments and inserts that just feel very on the nose, they did a pretty poor job at it. I'm gonna give Orphan a C. The movie is quite divisive. What do you think of this one?